You've given us a remarkable insight into how a judge uses proportionality and the test of reasonableness to make the balanced judgments with human dignity as the touchstone. All justice systems in every country are resource challenged. In most countries, many sections of the community are unable to access the system of justice. And so non-judicial dispute resolutions, the principles of human dignity and proportionality, how can they be practically applied out with the formal justice system, but into the everyday life of the community as to how they address problems and identify some kind of common framework of finding solutions and reconciling competing claims and rights, with or without the court supervisory jurisdiction. But last night you were referring to Ubuntu, and I don't know what relevance that or other experiences in South Africa might have for us here and elsewhere in the world.
Well, interestingly enough, the section of the community that's bought into alternative dispute resolution more actively than any other is big business. Because court proceedings are protracted, they're expensive, and they end up making enemies out of people who've got to do business with themselves in future. And so there's been an enormous expansion of alternative dispute resolution. And one of the great achievements of Harry Wolff when he was responsible for this was to modernize the whole of civil procedure and to make it far less expensive and to encourage ways of resolving matters outside of court. And clearly that can apply far more generally to all civil matters. And I imagine domestic disputes as well, neighbours' disputes, disputes over property. Criminal law, it's not all that easy, but I think ways of diversion, certainly with youth, that's catching on, that's been tried out with considerable success in various parts of the world. And you always do costing, and it costs something. You have to have trained social workers and people sensitive and magistrates who understand what's happening. But again, you're saving, because you're not sending people to lockups where people have to be fed and guarded and so on. So I think the costing is always more than justified in terms of the outcome. We put quite a lot of emphasis on participatory democracy. We had a case in which we actually struck down a law because our upper house, National Council of Provinces, had promised interested parties that they would be able to deal in the provinces with their comments on the bill before it was finally passed. And then right at the last minute, they said, no, we have time constraints, and we're withdrawing the offer. And our constitution says that the legislative bodies must, I don't know if it says take reasonable measures, but take measures to facilitate public involvement. And we decided that means more than just having a space in the gallery for the public. It means, and more than just allowing people to testify before, we call them portfolio committees. It means giving opportunities out there in the provinces, particularly for those sections of the community who never had a chance, who can't take a plane to Cape Town, and where the kinds of issues are those that are of great local concern. And one of the cases there was dealing with traditional medicine. And that's very rooted, quite literally, to particular localities and so on. We actually struck down the law. And it was, I think, a very striking case on the importance of participatory democracy as opposed to purely formal democracy. Clearly, elections every 5 years, absolutely vital. And that almost shouldn't go without saying that, it should go without saying, but it's necessary to say it. But we said formal democracy should be backed up with participatory democracy. And I remember reading something by Helena Kennedy about and this is what that's all leading up to, the paradox that British people are exceptionally generous and giving. They have boot sales, they do all sorts of things in the community, And they are very, very concerned and compassionate. And yet somehow when it comes to the debates in the House of Lords where she is in Parliament, there's a skepticism and a distance and an alienation. And she's looking for ways of connecting the two. I'm not sure in terms of legal process how it could be done. It's certainly very strong in traditional African society, where you get certainly family disputes. The families get together, they discuss. Now that could be very patriarchal and very inclement, very unjust to women, to young women, to young men even. But in our new democratic society, where people speak out and assert their rights, and claim their rights, we find that as very positive. And neighborhoods and communities being involved in settling disputes, it can give rise to a form of, an extreme form of mob justice. It can be quite terrifying and terrible. But one's assuming the kinder sides of people coming together and helping their neighbors could be involved. We don't have much collected material on that, but I certainly see it having a great future in our country, and I think everywhere in the world, because people, I think they're tired of being alone, and they want that sense of organic connection with community and sharing. I think there's quite a great response and almost an ache for that, and the problem is to find the appropriate mechanisms that don't end up denying people choice and